More immigrants, more homeless. The worldly possessions.
In Egypt, yes. Egypt is very, very safe. But here I am for work and for myself.
But you know, Egypt has had its share of terrorism too.
No,
But
who told you that?
no, I mean, except for the Muslim Brotherhood,
No, but that they don't do anything like that.
you don't have that in Egypt.
No, we live in peace long time ago. Something like a little bit happened here and there, but we live in peace like long time ago. Nothing happened.
Do you ever think there will be peace in Gaza between the Palestinians and the Israelis?
Never,
Never.
never.
What do you think is going to happen going forward?
Until now, I don't know. Everything is going up, like the war, everything, and Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran. We don't know what's going on.
Well,
They need to stop everything right now because they still do it. A lot of people can do something wrong.
well, thank you for talking to us.
You're welcome.
All right, very appreciated.
Experience art with 5,000 years of history. Inspired by the divine. Experience.
Not really what you should do according to Mao's instruction. So that is routine. So that's the kind of struggle session I've been through. It's called gentle, milder version of the real struggle session, but it is a way of life during the Cultural Revolution.
Absolutely fascinating. And let's take a short break and we'll be right back.
Taiwan Lee sends him a text message and basically says, don't be so hasty in condemning China. You should think of this in the same light as the way members who are not a part of your church condemn Joseph Smith, the original prophet of your church. So he used that, and he says, pray to God and seek the guidance of the Holy Spirit before you make this decision. Pray to God and ask the Holy Spirit if condemning China for what they're doing to the Uyghurs is right. Well, guess what? The resolution failed. The next year, someone else tried to make a similar resolution, and it went nowhere. So, I mean, yes, so they do use even religion. And again, was this legislator a bad guy? No, I mean, he was trying to do the right thing, but, these China-Utah relationships that the Associated Press talked about, so like Alexia said, I mean, they said there's no state they have a greater influence on than Utah. Able to where they can push legislation forward or stop legislation they don't like, and that was an example there.
Okay, so as we finish up, I still want to talk about the point, which is this 15-minute city that's in development. Mm-hmm. What is the status of that? And also let's talk a little bit about why this concept is so problematic, because it seems so efficient and helpful, at least in the messaging.
Sure. Well, they've demolished the prisons, so they are full steam ahead with planning. They have monthly meetings. They are open to the public for input, although it's the way they speak about it, they of course try to show the positive spin of it. But what we like to highlight, and what you've done so well before on your show, is actually when these smart cities have rolled out, mostly in the UK, you see what this looks like for residents of these cities. It's very restrictive on when you can leave, if you can leave. It ties into your social credit score, like what we're seeing in China. So it becomes a very restrictive lifestyle where it's being sold as, well, everything is so convenient. It's 15 minutes away. So, it's a walkable community. So it's definitely marketed to the population to be something that is a positive. But when you actually pull back the layers, what you're going to see is this total surveillance state, which is tied to essentially your social credit score.
I think initially it will be kind of this cool, like, walkable city, minimal vehicles. The next time there's a lockdown, what are they able to do with this? Everything becomes on a smart meters or smart this. Everything's controllable. And what happens when you get on the wrong side of that with the powers that be, or when the next time there's a lockdown and you don't want to wear your mask, you don't want to obey the government? What happens? How easy would it be to restrict or turn off your freedoms, your rights to leave that? the way those smart cities are set up, it is the perfect. It's a perfect breeding ground for exactly what they've been doing in China. That's the thing is, it doesn't take a lot of imagination when you look what is happening in China. When you jaywalk and the camera picks up your face or your gait, your social credit score goes down, and then your friends know your score. And if you hang out with somebody who their score is low and your score goes down, it's just a. I don't want it.
I think the best way to look at it is technocratic governance versus constitutionality.
Well said.
And if we're living in a regime where we don't have that freedom that is granted to us in the Constitution, are we really even free?
No, and this is a foundational question of our time. And Alexia and Jason Preston, such a pleasure to have had you on.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, Sue is next.
For striking the ambulance. The IDF released this statement on Telegram. An IDF aircraft struck an ambulance that was identified by forces as being used by a Hamas terrorist cell in close proximity to their position in the battle zone. A number of Hamas terrorist operatives were killed in the strike. We have information which demonstrates that Hamas's method of operation is to transfer terror operatives and weapons in ambulances. The IDF also emphasized that the area is a battle zone, and civilians are repeatedly called upon to evacuate south for their own safety. But even after the IDF's repeated warnings, Palestinian civilians still remain in the area. Secretary of State Antony Blinken flew to Israel on Wednesday to speak with Israeli leadership about the issue of civilian casualties. And he also noted that Hamas uses civilians as human shields.
We provided Israel advice that only the best of friends can offer on how to minimize civilian deaths while still achieving its objectives of finding and finishing Hamas terrorists and their infrastructure of violence.
The IDF previously reported that Hamas headquarters are located beneath hospitals, including this one at Al-Shifa Hospital. On Friday, the IDF released a recorded conversation of an official in the Gaza healthcare system, also mentioning Al-Shifa Hospital. The official went on to say that if he tries to take fuel to the hospital, Hamas will take it. Jason Perry, NTD News.
After meeting U.S. Secretary Blinken, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu ruled out a temporary ceasefire, despite calls for humanitarian pauses. Blinken also met with Yair Lapid, leader of the opposition in Israel, and stressed Washington's commitment to Israel. In the U.S., protesters in Oakland, California, tried to block a ship reportedly preparing to set sail for Israel, carrying military supplies. Protesters also sat outside several senators' offices in D.C., demanding ceasefire in Gaza. Now, let's take a look at other top national headlines today. The judge in charge of former President Trump's 2020 election case has set some important dates for jury selection. Judge Tanya Chutkan told special counsel Jack Smith and Trump's lawyers to make a list of questions to use for screening potential jurors by January 9th. If they can't agree on certain questions, they must inform the judge in a joint filing, explaining each side's position. Potential jurors will come to the courthouse in Washington, D.C. and fill out the questionnaire on February 9th. Both Trump's lawyers and the prosecutors can look up information about the potential jurors on the internet, but they can't talk to the jurors directly and they can't use non-public databases. Meanwhile, Trump's legal team is appealing the partial gag order placed on it by Judge Chutkan. The attorneys wrote in the filing that no court in American history has put a gag order on a defendant who is in the middle of campaigning for public office, especially not the leading candidate in a presidential election. More information about the FBI's raid of the home of a top fundraiser for New York City Mayor Eric Adams. It comes as part of an investigation over an alleged kickback scheme involving the Turkish government and a Brooklyn construction company. Mayor Adams weighed in on the raid at a press conference yesterday.
I hold my campaign to the highest ethical standards. Any inquiry that is done, we're going to fully participate and make sure that it's done correctly. I have not been contacted by anyone from any law enforcement agency, and that's why I came back from the DC to be here, to be on the ground and look at this inquiry as it was made.
According to law enforcement, the raid was connected to a broader public corruption probe. It aimed to establish if money was illegally funneled to Adams' 2021 campaign for mayor. The raid was purposely conducted while the mayor was out of town, according to the New York Post. The Post reports that the investigation focused on gathering evidence of foreign funds entering his campaign through straw donors. According to the warrant obtained by the New York Times, agents were looking for evidence of the theft of federal funds and wire fraud. One of the world's biggest shipping firms is laying off thousands of more workers during the holiday season. Maersk said Friday it plans to cut 3,500 jobs, most of them in the next 8 weeks. The Danish company already let 6,500 employees go this year. Maersk says less demand and lower prices have tanked its revenues, a sign the pandemic-driven shipping boom is over. Amazon founder
Background, a closer look at what's under his company's control. Princeton Review is known for its private test prep courses and SAT guidebooks. Tutor.com, a tutoring company, has contracts with the U.S. military. It serves military members for free. Fred Hu's company also controls Spring Education Group, which runs over 200 private schools across the U.S. and Asia. But its Chinese ownership has sparked controversies. In New York, Spring Education controls a network of private schools called Basis Independent Schools. In 2019, over 190 parents signed a letter sent to the school's leadership expressing concerns about Chinese ownership. Spring Education also hit a roadblock in Florida. Governor Ron DeSantis suspended scholarships to 4 schools controlled by the company. That's over alleged ties to the Chinese Communist Party. In a statement, DeSantis said the Chinese Communist Party is not welcome in the state of Florida, adding Florida will not put up with any attempt to influence students with a communist ideology or allow Floridians' tax dollars to go to schools that are connected to our foreign adversaries. Casey Fleming, CEO of Black Ops Partners, sends parents a word of caution.
Children are extremely moldable, malleable, right? And when you get children to set their values early on, then those values are very difficult to change. So what we're talking about is your family values are being overwritten and overruled in the schools, the tutoring programs, and so on. So you have to understand this is a battle for your values and your children's lives.
Back to Fred Hu, chairman of the Chinese company Primavera, who advises Harvard and Columbia University and used to lead the Greater China region at Goldman Sachs. Back in China, he lectured at a Communist Party school and advised Chinese authorities. Hu is also a member of the CPPCC of Hunan Province, a political advisory body.
We can't buy anything in China. Why do we allow the Chinese Communist Party, underscore communist, to buy land, schools, educational platforms, hospitals, so on? Write your congressman. This is squarely on your shoulders and in your living room.
NTD reached out to Primavera and Spring Education Group for comment, but did not hear back before airtime. A string of bipartisan actions against China coming from U.S. officials. First, a rare green agenda backed by Republicans. The Senate GOP is leading a first-time proposal linking climate policies to trade called the Foreign Pollution Fee Act. It would impose import fees on high carbon emitting countries, particularly China, specifically to make the communist regime compensate for not enforcing environmental regulations. Speaking of defense, legislation targeting national security is also on the table. The Protect Our Bases Act allows the Foreign Investment Committee to review foreign land purchases near U.S. military bases. Experts say China has been buying American land with the goal of damaging critical U.S. infrastructure. Zooming on the world's smallest technology, lawmakers are seeking answers from the Biden administration on how they plan to deal with China's use of open chip design. RISC-V technology can be leveraged as a crucial component in products ranging from smartphones to advanced AI processors. The concern here is that Beijing might use design to achieve dominance over Washington, putting U.S. national security on the line. And look up, views of Chinese drones could disappear from U.S. skies under the newly proposed American Security Drone Act. Government or private entities would be barred from using federal funding to buy drones made by China, owned or affiliated companies. Aside from public funds, watch out for your own wallet too. Everyday spending on things like groceries, security cameras, and even seafood might be funding the CCP's human rights abuses without your knowledge. Retail giant Costco is facing scrutiny from the Congressional Executive Commission on China. That's for selling products allegedly tied to the regime's forced labor and surveillance in the Xinjiang region. Other than legislation, lawmakers agreed that federal funding should not benefit China. In a 61-36 vote, the Senate approved an amendment to that package that would stop the use of funds that benefit China-based entities or their subsidiaries. And lastly, South Africa. The nation's garment industry is hanging by a thread. That's as U.S. Congress still deciding whether to renew a trade initiative set to expire by 2025. The African Growth and Opportunity Act has received bipartisan support since the beginning. Lawmakers say it's critical to countering China's influence in Africa. Indo-Pacific countries are finding themselves stuck between China and the United States. But U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says they shouldn't have to choose sides. In a speech ahead of this month's APEC summit, Yellen sought to reassure Asian countries that Washington is trying to avoid dividing the global economy. Here's what she said.
The United States does not seek to decouple from China. A full separation of our economies or an approach in which countries, including those in the Indo-Pacific, are forced to take sides would have significant negative global repercussions. We have no interest in such a divided world and its disastrous effects.
Yellen said that fully decoupling from China's economy isn't practical. She talked about the complexity of Asian supply chains and the region's deep economic ties to China. Yellen said the U.S. is instead seeking to diversify from China by investing in manufacturing at home and by boosting ties with allies around the world, including others in the Indo-Pacific. Her comments came amid concerns over geopolitical tensions between the world's two largest economies. Those disagreements have led to growing controls on export and national security technologies.
More aggressive moves from Beijing in international airspace. Canada's defense minister says a Chinese military airplane fired flares at Canadian pilots last Sunday. That's while they were flying over international waters in the South China Sea. He called Beijing's move reckless and said it risked downing the aircraft. The incident marks the second of its kind in just 2 weeks. Take a look at this clip showing Chinese fighter jet getting less than 10 feet from a U.S. Air Force B-52 bomber last Tuesday. The U.S. military warned the plane used uncontrolled excessive speed flying below and in front of the B-52 and nearly caused a collision. 4 weeks on trial, naming Sam Bankman-Fried guilty of stealing billions of dollars Thursday. But reports say there's more to the case than fraud and money laundering, and it's tied to China. Bankman-Fried is the founder and CEO of cryptocurrency exchange FTX and linked crypto trading company Alameda Research. According to testimony from ex-Alameda CEO Caroline Ellison, Bankman-Fried allegedly directed staff to deliver a bribe, quote, in the ballpark of $100 million to Chinese state officials. It happened in 2021. To grease the wheels for the return of $1 billion in Alameda trading funds. Beijing had frozen the cash months prior as part of a money laundering investigation. Ellison said the funds made up a substantial amount of the company's trading capital at the time.
Yeah.
After the freeze, a team was put together to recover it, including Ellison and 2 staff members with, quote, connections to China. The bribe came after several failed attempts to get the money back. Some staff members reportedly objected to the idea, but were told to stay quiet. Ellison testified that the company did quietly recover the funds after nearly a year. Beckman-Fried did not face bribery charges during the trial. He now faces up to 110 years in prison for stealing from FTX customers and defrauding Alameda lenders. His sentence hearing is set for March next year. While world leaders gather in the UK to talk cooperation on artificial intelligence safety this week, the world's number 2 AI superpower isn't signing on to a deal to regulate the tech. First, a closer look at what risks AI actually carries.
We feel very privileged for the real Red Guards, and they have this propaganda, Mao Zedong thought propaganda team, and so came to my town. So I joined them. So they have to give shows on everywhere they stop, and I was given the task of carrying those portraits to lead the team on stage, and I was so proud of myself. So it is something that swept everybody away. There are people who saw this and understand what it was. I think a lot of people just don't. A lot of kids, it's just something that you feel like they have to join. Just imagine, just think about 2020, the riots, the BMM, so many people join it. Do they really understand what it was? But they joined it. And we saw when I saw the videos of just thousands of people got on the street thinking they're doing something great.
Do you feel like you were brainwashed?
Absolutely. That is the result of brainwash. I was too little to do any damage, but what's the Red Guards? They were absolutely brainwashed. They were brainwashed to the point that they believe their purpose of life is to follow Mao's instruction and do what Mao told them to do. And just because of that, Mao was able to control them and to really, the Cultural Revolution is really the revolution of the youth. And Mao used them to took the power, and Mao used them to destroy the traditional culture and all the institutions. It's all done by the young people. And why could they do that? Because they're all brainwashed.
I'm thinking about James Lindsay's The Marxification of Education. Of course, he wrote the introduction to your book, but we didn't realize how deeply in our educational system in the U.S. and Canada, that this whole oppressor-oppressed ideology has been embedded at such an early stage in life. I mean, this is one of the big parallels you draw out.
Yeah, I think in China there's a little bit difference because Mao had power, CCP had power. They totally control the educational system. They absolutely, they decide what to teach. And of course, it's all Marxist and Maoist values. And but here, and a lot of people just don't understand because they were never taught the history of communism. And a lot of the things that they heard sounds kind of good. Sounds kind of like, you want to be inclusive, and you want to be empathetic, you want to love, you want to accept. And so this is something that people like me who've been through the Cultural Revolution, who've been through or lived under communism, we see through right away because the same thing was taught to us. But people here, they don't understand it. But because it's deceptive, a lot of people just accept it without understanding that it is what they're supporting actually is evil.
Where is the commonality between what teachers are doing today, and I say not, of course, not all teachers, but many, and what they're being taught, and what was being taught to teachers or in Maoist China?
Yeah, in Maoist China, it's very simple. From a very early age, kindergarten, we were taught that our parents are just biological parents. The real parents is the party and Chairman Mao. And so if there's a conflict between choosing your own parents or the party, you should always choose the party. And that's basically what the Red Guards did. Yeah, many of them denounced their parents. Many of them reported their parents and ended that up with their parents being executed. And here, especially today in school, and you are supposed to go to trusted adults, not your parents. And so they did not say party, but it is very similar. They want to cut the ties between parents and the children. Why? That's how you control the children.
You know, you're just reminding me, you know, in the gender-affirming care ideology, you know, that basically this is a so-called standard of care that's being applied for many children in schools, where the counselors are basically, they'll say things like in front of the kid and to the parent, you know, would you like to have, you know, a dead child or a living child? I use along with our approach, your child will commit suicide. The parent becomes sort of the outsider.
Absolutely, and then they made it sound like it's the government that is the real protector of those children.
There's no such thing as someone else's child. No such thing as someone else's child. Our nation's children are all our children.
And that's exactly what happened in China. And I'm sure in all our communist countries.
You know, another thing that's very striking to me is this hostility towards honest accounts of history or you know, accurate accounts of history.
Yes, that is always something that the communists do. In order to control the children, you have to rewrite history. And in China, the history was totally rewritten. And the history that I learned was absolute fiction. And even today, I still have to detox all this junk they put in my mind. Those who control the present control the past. And when you control the past, you control the future. And so to me, there's so many people here in America, they don't see what we see. Why? Because they don't know the history. The history was so whitewashed. And in school, they were taught the crimes of the Nazi, the crimes of slavery. Few of them know the crime committed in the name of communism. Far more people were killed under communism, but they were taught communism is about sharing. That's rewrite history.
Well, you know, a testament to that is a whole lot of young people view it as a positive system. I mean, there's been multiple surveys done on this. It's astonishing. I think this is a Chinese expression, is putting the powder on the face of communism, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was talking to a coworker of mine, and she said her new daughter-in-law called herself a communist. I said, do you know what that means? Do you know that sounds like someone tell the Jews that they are Nazi? But she said, really? Yeah. That is how bad things are. That they absolutely have no idea. Why? It's because they're taught that way.
It's almost like, you know, it's actually the successful people, whoever is successful, those are the people that are cast by the system and related ideologies as the oppressor, irrespective of whether they're oppressing anybody.
Yes.
What do you think?
That's actually the operating system for Marxism. And so in China, how did they do that? They identified those rich as the problem for everything that China was experiencing. So the goal is to eliminate the rich so that they can achieve equity. And so the rich were those who were successful people, and including Mao's own father. Mao's father was a prosperous and rich peasant, and he described how his father got rich. He did not exploit anyone, oppress anyone. He worked hard, and he was smart, made a lot of good decisions. So in communism, wealth is the original sin, and they are the problem. That they are the reason for everyone else's misery. And here, same thing, we see the same thing happen. And so the Chinese were supposedly, or the Asians in general, according to the skin color, we were non-white, right? We were supposedly the people of color, and not anymore. And we are now called white adjacent. So why? Only one reason: we're just too successful. So they do not want people to be successful. When you are successful, you are independent, and you are not easy to control. And they like people to be dependent so that they can control them. But not only that, they want to make this a divisive way to set people against each other. They really ferment resentment and hatred to those who are successful. So only when you understand that, we can take the next step to expose it, and then we also need to take action and get organized. And I always tell people, start local. And the first and the most important thing is to get the right people in the school board, because in order to win this war, we have to win our school system, education system, because those children are the future of this country.
Well, Shivan.
More colorful now with our crayon from heaven. Please don't be sad. There isn't any sorrow, only laughter and joy for all of your tomorrow. We'll be sending you letters all through the year with our crayon from heaven. As I look at the heavens over that you bounded sky, your memories appear and draw a smile on my face. We'll always be together and you'll always be mine. Thank God for crayon from heaven. My darling, my life, the days are so long now. I miss you so much, I can't believe you're gone. My heart was torn apart when you had to go, and I know that life changes, but I love you so.
Country as the world is already laughing at us.
While we're dividing ourselves from within, while the nation is focused on internal battles, a greater threat looms on the horizon: the Chinese Communist Party.
绝不允许任何外来势力奴役我们，谁妄想这样干，必将头破血流。
They're systematically infiltrating our government. They're stealing our technology and they're attacking our freedoms.
The FBI is opening a new China-related counterintelligence case about every 10 hours.
The Chinese are preparing for war.
We Americans are very good at being oblivious as to what our enemies are saying. And we did not pay attention to Osama bin Laden until one day he killed 2,977 Americans.
This is not just a battle of ideologies or just about pursuit of dominance. This is a war that will alter the course of our lives. And if we lose, it will condemn our children and future generations to a world of unimaginable horrors. This is why my show in the Epoch Times is so critical. We're not afraid to take on the Chinese regime head on. And he said, they told me that if I keep talking to you, they're going to hire a hitman to chop off one of my hands. We're not afraid to call out the CCP for their atrocities. We're completely independent. Our only interest is in traditional journalism and reporting truthfully.
Bizarre news today. The Chinese Communist Party is opening up police stations, departments, and working as overseas bureaus all around the world, including right here in New York. You heard that right.
It's time to replace the Chinese regime's propaganda with truth. Get back to the basics. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All you have to do is subscribe to Epoch TV. You'll get so...
Yeah, Sue is next.